This is the final word, Ash's final word, with Jeff Lemon and Adam Collins.
Hello.
A final thank you and farewell to our friends at Westfield London and Westfield Stratford City, the Field of Dreams. Who knew? I've learned so much more about Westfield than I thought I would have known. And
What a beautiful relationship,
what a beautiful
Jeff.
relationship. If Westfield kissed me in a meadow, I would lift 1 foot off the ground because I would be so swept away with the emotion. And in a way, I feel like they have. If one could fall in love with the shopping centre, I have. Now, this is the not daily, because we knew that when we recorded the daily, we would be so caught up in the detail of what had happened on day 5 at the Oval. So this is the season retrospective. If you are watching the video version of this, you'll notice that we're sitting in a commentary box and wearing suspiciously the same clothing as we were in the Daily Show, because yes, we're not doing the daily with a day to think about it, because we're both going to be somewhere else, hopefully not recording a podcast tomorrow. So we're going to do it today, even though when you hear it, it will already be tomorrow. So for you, tomorrow will be different. That's how time works.
I'm willing to take our audience into our confidence.
Yep.
So we did record a story time before play today. Then we commentated the entire day. Then we did our daily show earlier. I did a number of post-play interviews, the various other commitments that we've both got. You wrote an article for The Guardian. We uploaded, with enormous difficulty, the daily show to YouTube, which took way longer than it ever has before.
For some, just for a final fuck you to us for doing the work for the series. It was like, oh, this thing that normally works didn't work. So if you're wondering why the video took, I don't know, 2 hours after play to get up, it's because I was spending all of that time swearing at a computer.
Well, it can timestamp it. It's 23 past 10. And after this, we're recording the weekly show, because we prepared that too. When all the wickets were falling today, we were taking turns at prepping for that too. So that's how it has to work sometimes. We'll still give it a red hot go, because all the episodes are slightly different from the one that came before it.
They are, and that is the very nature of can't stop, won't stopism, which is our guiding philosophy here. But we wanted to think about the series because it's curious. You come to the end of it, it's 2-2, and I'm sure there certainly was, leading up to this test, a lot of, well, who's actually better? Which team actually is the deserved winner? You know, moral Ash's bullshit aside, and which was all fun and games for a while. Like, who deserves to be the winner? And I think you could look at it from an English perspective and say, well, if we hadn't been rained off, then would have won the 4th test match, and therefore that makes 3-2. Although, of course, if England wins the 4th test match, then this is a different test match and something else happens in it. But with the head of steam that England had, maybe there's a good chance they would have won this one as well. And I mean, seeing a comeback from 2-0 down to 3-0 up would have been historic in every way and sensational. But I think also it's a bit of a morass that you can get trapped into to say who was actually better, because, you know, the team that came out and won the first 2 games of the series has a pretty good claim to being a good cricket team as well.
Brat and I spoke about this in our end of play spot. Australia were the better team in June, and England were the better team in July. And the very fact that
you don't win premierships in June or July.
Well, the Ashes didn't start till the 1st of August in 2019. I'm just seeing some Instagram memories come up and reminding me that this was preview day at Edgbaston 4 years ago.
Did they not start until the
1st of August because of the
World Cup finished on the 14th of July.
And then,
what did we do in between time?
A little bit later than that. It might have been like the 17th of July. There was the Ireland Test match. There was the women's test match at Taunton we went along to for a week as well. There was a tour game that Australia played down at Kent.
Yes, they played a tour game.
There was stuff.
There was the Lions played Australia A.
And the Australia versus Australia game
internal, the
was
Hick
the
12
same,
versus the Haddon 12.
which was the same week as the Ireland Test match, which is why I didn't go.
Believe it or not, there are very few people on this earth who did radio commentary for both the Lions and Australia A game and the Hick 12 versus Haddon 12 game. And
You were it.
I'm it.
You were the one.
The only person in that Venn diagram, I'm squarely in the middle.
So to come back to your point, like, this battle of ideologies, if you like, has been how the series was set up, and it really played out that way.
Yep.
Both sides lent more and more into the style of play that it was perceived they'd play like at the start. I think we thought, you know, the old Bazball's all good and well, but do it against Cummins, Hazelwood, Stark and Lyon.
Yeah, well, they did. Well, not Lyon, because he wasn't there.
Well, they did while he was there, albeit with Lyon still taking 8 wickets in the first Test match. But they scored runs at a run rate against Lyon that was commensurate with the other bowlers. They got quicker, England, through the series. You know, they got more, if you want to call it that, Bazball in their disposition. They refined it. They ironed out the kinks. They hit their pull and hook shots from up to down by design, because they realised that trying to smack every ball over the rope at Lords when the short pitch strategy arrived. And in hindsight, that was an inevitability. It's like the singularity, right? Like all things reach its natural endpoint. And for this, with England playing the way they were, it was inevitable that Australia would deploy that, and England in return would too, and that became a bit of a stalemate at Lords in the early stages of the series. But yeah, once England got through that, and they brought in fresh blood, and we'll come to this in a little bit. It was really interesting to see two teams playing very, very different brands of cricket with the bat, and watching two sides come up against each other at the perfect time. Australia World Test champions, started the new cycle, a team that's quite on the old side, not everybody, but most of the players in the Aussie team won't be here in 4 years' time. And an England side that have some veterans, sure, but you go through their top 6 or top 7, I think most of them will be in the top 6 and top 7 the next time Australia here in 4 years' time. And we might deal with a bit of that at the end of this particular program. But yeah, I mean, the Ashes are always better in England anyway, for whatever reason. Yeah. Close Ashes series in Australia, the last time we went down to straight with the Ashes to be won in the 5th test, I think was in 82, 83.
It's funny, isn't it? Because it's not like, it isn't sort of history masturbation. It isn't that kind of nonsense you get at Lords of, we all have to bow down and respect the historical home of everything, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Because the first test played in Australia, the Ashes are effectively, as a thing, as a concept, are created in Australia when the Catalyst game happens at the Oval, but the creation of the name, the nickname and the trophy and all the rest of it comes in Australia. So it's not this kind of nostalgia wank kind of situation that it must be in England because secretly we're all sort of colonials who actually want to bow down to the sort of maternal empire figure master and get tied back to the apron strings and all the cliches.
Right.
So it's not that. It's just that the contest is better.
It is, and that's
bowlers
what
are in the game more.
They are, and that's what makes Stokes' declaration this evening that he will lead England to Australia in 2.5 years' time all the more compelling, right? So I think
if he still has 2 legs.
Well, I framed up Stokes as like maybe he's in his last year of international cricket. He'd retired from the one-day stuff last year. He has very lucrative deals playing in T20 cricket at his disposal whenever he wishes to have them. I know he didn't play a lot of IPL, but he was injured, and he'll have the chance to play more as a specialist bat, I suppose. Maybe he ends up as England's long-term number 3 in the absence of his bowling. Maybe he becomes Tony Greig and bowls off-spin. So I tell you what, I've watched him bowl a lot of off-spin out in the middle here at the Oval this week, and he's very good at it. But, maybe McCullum's there as well, and I hope he is. Stokes and McCullum leading this particular type of England team to Australia would make that a far more interesting series than the one we had 18 months ago. So, yeah, this division between the teams I don't think it'll get even any wider than it is at the moment. I would expect and anticipate that teams will play more like England as we advance. I think that will become more the norm. I sense that. I don't know, I might be wrong. But still, it's been watching someone like Usman Khawaja face 1,258 balls at a strike rate of, 30-something, up against, Harry Brook, whose strike rate through the series is 90-something, Crawley as well, his opposing number, Khawaja's in a way. That is exciting and fascinating in and of itself. And the 2-2 scoreline, I hope that Australian fans don't get too invested in the idea that we was robbed because of the ball thing. That absolutely played a role on the final day. I don't want to dismiss it as an input, but don't get too wrapped up in it. It's not the we was robbed thing. It's that this broadly landed where it should have. One side dominated the start of the series. The other side dominated the second half of the series. A 2-2 scoreline is perfectly in keeping with that kind of series, and that's okay.
And
that is
there
okay.
and there are bits, there are sections where each team wins games, and there are sections where each team contributes to themselves losing games.
Exactly.
And fundamentally, I think it's England not getting the batting approach right in the first 2 tests. The second innings at Edgbaston and the first innings at Lords are the times when they stuff it up, where they go too hard and they lose wickets too quickly. And then Australia stuff it up at Headingley when they're ahead in that game, and they should win that game. They should close it out, and they don't. Those are the lost opportunities where either team had their opportunities to win the series outright, and they didn't because they didn't get it right at a key moment.
There'll be books and documentaries made about this series because it's one of the modern greats, whether it's as good as 05. I mean, I don't think it... I know after the third test I said it had the potential to be that, but in order for it to have truly materialised, this needed to be a test where England could win the series. I think it was a bit different in 05.
I think you need a winner as well at the end of it. Like the shared series doesn't quite lend itself to greatness because there has to be that stake, something at stake in the sporting.
Had there been jeopardy, yeah, I'm just trying to think of if it could have been 2-2 and been as great. I think even if 05, if Australia win on the final day and it's a 2-2 draw in that series, we still think of 05 being 05. I think it reached that boiling point through tests 2, 3 and 4. Whereas this one, it was a deflation after Manchester. The sodden final day, the retention of the Ashes in those slightly unusual circumstances are coming here.
The underlay of 05 is still the underdogs overturn the champions.
Certainly the champions. I don't share the view that they were necessarily the underdogs, but certainly the team. I still can't believe you genuinely think that. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The England team of 05 winning definitely contributes to the overall narrative of it. But my point, after 3 test matches, we had 3 tests within the margins of what people call a close finish, within 3 wickets.
4 tests.
That's what I was going to say. This is the 4th in that. 4 out of 5. The problem was Manchester. Manchester sucked the oxygen out, whereas in 05, it was fever pitch when we left Trent Bridge and came here for the 5th test match.
Yeah.
So that's the difference. It was just a sequencing thing. Had we had the bad test match to start at Edgbaston, and we have the 4 close ones after that, maybe this does feel like the 05 conclusion.
And equally an 05 Manchester draw is a very different thing to a 2023 Manchester draw.
Absolutely.
Because it's a different kind of draw. It's not just the draw that's a problem.
It was the best kind of draw in 05, wasn't it? Sure. Where it's the tail end trying to bat it out. And I think it's an interesting thought exercise. And I wrote some notes before we recorded this about the big moments in each test match. And, viewing them in a little bit of hindsight, not too much hindsight, but in the case of Edgbaston, 6 weeks hindsight as to where they fit and how we feel about them. So the Leach-Moeen transition from nowhere, that simple text message 7 weeks ago, and the benefits of that are borne out on the final day, on the final afternoon of the series, where Moeen gets his groove, takes 3 of the 5 wickets in that flurry, and it all comes together seamlessly, and in doing so, he can end his test career the way he would have loved to have ended it, rather than kind of putting out a press release, as he did a couple of years ago, saying, I'm kind of done with red ball cricket, and so be it, and had a great time, catch you later. This feels more meaningful that he's done it in a series like this.
Yeah, and it took that time and then eventually paid off when he was crocked as well and injured and all the rest of it. Day one at Edgbaston was just a lot of chaotic fun, and the early declaration, I quite enjoyed it. I thought it was a bit showy and a bit silly, but it was also, why not? And God, people went on about it for the next few weeks. But like I've said a bunch of times on the show, if you're in a position where you've got 50 runs to defend and you need to get through Pat Cummins, Nathan Lyon and Josh Hazlewood, you should be able to do that.
I still support the declaration. I know I'm totally against the grain here, but the thinking was that they get a crack at David Warner with Broad on day one, after making 393. I know hindsight makes it look a bad move, but it doesn't make it a bad move in the moment.
I don't think it looks like a bad move in hindsight, because I think England still put themselves in a position to win that test.
Yeah, the other side of that is that Joe Root was batting like a dream and they could have made 500. And anyway, it's by the by.
Maybe, but probably not batting with 2 wickets in hand. He's probably not going to get him to 500.
Nevertheless, I'm saying that I supported what they did at the time. I still think it was a worthwhile punt, but it was a punt, and it did backfire because they lost the game. Because of course they had not as many runs as Australia and lost the game in turn. That's kind of the point, that Australia had enough time to get the runs on the final day had they been chasing 50 more. Anyway, moot point. The boundary first ball, the Crawley booming cover drive, which I did an interview on the field of play, maybe an hour before, something like that, and did some, lots of pre-game media as you would have as well, and we did lots of stuff on the podcast too. And so much of it came down to, can they do it against Pat Cummins and co? And then for Crawley to, it's a long half volley and all the rest of it, but to smack the hell out of it. It wasn't just a cover drive, it was the full kitchen sink, it was full commitment to the bit. First ball of the series, it's an iconic moment straight away in Ashes history. The response in the commentary boxes on Comcam, and the belief that it instilled within the England dressing room that we're actually going to have a real crack at this, and this is possible. We can do this, and it may be one delivery in isolation, and sure, Australia end up winning the test, but there was something to that.
I like the little bit where Boland and Cummins come out when it's absolutely leaden skies, and they get those few overs at England's openers, and it felt like real difficult, proper England sort of ball moving around sort of cricket.
And then the next morning, a reverse ramp first ball from Joe Root, playing 2 off Boland. Well, he didn't hit the first one, did he? But he hit the next 2.
He hit the first one, and then he missed the next.
I feel like he missed the one off Cummins' first ball and nailed the next 2 off Boland. Anyway, the point is that Root going full reverse ramp.
First ball of the day that he hits.
Does he miss the first one? Doesn't the first one go over his stumps?
I I mean, my memory's
I feel
absolutely
like the
cooked at this
Boland,
point.
the two Boland ones are the ones he nails. Either way, the very fact that he was encouraged
Oh
by
yeah, no,
Stuart
he
Broad.
does. He did miss the first one. That's right.
Stuart
And
Broad saying
everybody's
to him
going, "What is he doing?" And then
Yeah.
he just does it again and nails it.
Yeah, it was the
you're
next
right,
over when hitting Boland out of the attack, but saying who was all over them under leaden skies, and the next day sun's out, sun's out, plums out, you know, Broad saying to Root, if you want to play a reverse ramp first ball, you do you. You play a reverse ramp first ball. So he did, and that kind of set off this chain reaction where England bat poorly relative to where they should have been. They were then kind of behind, giving Australia a chaseable tally, and the atmospherics on that final day. From memory, there was quite a bit of rain, and Australia had to do the majority of their chasing in like maybe a session and a little wee bit. Wasn't a particularly long time. England taking consistent wickets, them getting home the way they got home with Cummins and line, one of the true great Ashes finishes, and you know, laser marker early on that Australia can win their way. They don't need to conform, but you know, the leadership of Cummins at the death there to keep his shit together with Nathan Lyon, two experienced men who wanted it badly. With the benefit of hindsight, that'll be viewed with cold comfort from Cummins. You know, it laid the foundation for the retention, but from there, of course, they should be winning the thing.
Yeah, and then I mean, slightly from a personal perspective, but the hype of like a brilliant last day finish in the women's test at Trent Bridge, hustling back to London, having your wedding on the one intervening day, and then going into day one of the Lord's Test the day after.
Yeah. Oh, it was quite something. I mean, I've got no voice at the moment, but I was very, very worried about my voice in the lead up to the wedding and the first day of Lord's, because I gave it everything at Edgbaston. I was completely knackered. The wedding was coming up, not a lot of sleep. Buck Stag Day in the middle of all of that. Meanwhile, behind in the air war, Ollie Robinson talking about, you know, England really having won that first test. That started the moral ashes.
We played all the cricket. I
We
reckon
played all
started
the
it,
cricket.
yeah.
We played all the cricket. Took us inside the dressing room. Of Brendan McCullum saying it felt like a win, and all the rest of it. Like that's where the moral ashes storyline or thread begins in that wisdom.com column.
Yep. And then I mean that England hooking collapse that I talked about, and then Nathan Lyon hobbling off injured. I mean that is the moment of the series for me. Like I don't see Manchester happening the way it panned out if Nathan Lyon's in that team. Like you realise how important he became over that span. 100 tests in a row across his entire career. He'd missed 4 tests since he first came into the team. All those years ago, extraordinary longevity, and then while being celebrated for it, rips his calf off the bone and has his hobbling down the steps thing to come out and bat, add some runs that are probably important in the wash-up at the end of the match.
Another great moment, the Nathan Lyon down the stairs waiting with James Anderson to walk out through the gate. Anderson saying, "What the fuck are you doing here?" And Lyon saying, I'm going to walk out, but waiting, knowing that he wouldn't get there in time. He'd be timed out. If he had have gone down at the normal time. And that is the passage of play that precedes Cummins and Stark. Just like immersive spell of bowling. You know, Cummins gets one to go through the gate. Hit the top of off, wasn't it? It was Stark who went through the gate of Crawley. You know, both of them doing what they do best. Stark with the late swing, Cummins with the more subtle movement, and doing it at crucial times for Australia to give themselves, put themselves in a position where the only way they could lose that test was something remarkable happening, and something remarkable did. Ben Stokes makes 155, the vast majority of that after the stumping, which put cricket front and centre in ways that it's frustrating, but it's also kind of exciting as well. When that Carey Bairstow thing happened, I knew exactly what was about to play out, in the spirit of cricket arena.
Right.
And so it proved. You know, you and I were in hot demand doing TV interviews around the world, Piers Morgan's show, and all of those requests, those bizarre requests that we were getting, and all of us collectively declined as a press pack until Pete Lawler put his head up on there, which was quite funny for different reasons.
Yeah, I didn't enjoy that few days at all. Like it makes my heart sink when things like that happen, because you're like, oh God, here we go. It's just going to be ugliness and slagging off and everybody telling everybody else that they're idiots.
I think we learnt a bit though. I reckon that might be our best episode of the run, was talking about what we learnt about the cultural differences between Australian and English cricket, like how our views matured and evolved over those 2 or 3 days, where others, I think, got more trenchant. We probably came a bit the other way and understood it a bit more because we were in the firing line, and our comments reflected that.
And then going to Leeds, and it's like revenge of the nice guys. You know, Chris Wokes comes into that match and is influential. Mitchell Marsh comes in and makes that feel-good 100, just one of the purest striking hundreds you'll see.
Cummins' response on the balcony to Marsh's
Yeah.
hundred's a real highlight for me too. Like, they love Marsh, and the full circle from the Oval 2019. All of that was great energy.
And Mark Wood coming in and bowling like the wind, smashing through Australia, and then 8 balls that he faces that changed the series with the bat.
Yeah, the spelly bowled to Khawaja and to Labuschagne. I went outside and watched it on the balcony at Leeds with Hartley and with Norcross, and it was like we weren't even really talking to each other. We were just like absorbed and consumed by watching the speed radar get progressively quicker and quicker, and hearing later that Jimmy Anderson had predicted that Wood would break 100 mile an hour that day. I think he said it to the tail enders WhatsApp group. He thought what he saw in training was that Wood was going to break 100, and he nearly bloody did. Believe the hype stuff, and then to go through the tail, the 5 for 4 collapse or whatever it was for Wood, or 4 for 5, I think he took in that collapse at the end, and really put the frighteners up Australia. That was by far the best day of the series to that point, on a great surface.
Yep, and then Travis Head doing the sort of mini Stokes innings, that 77, where he's whomping it off his legs into the crowd, taking on the short ball.
And that session too, right? We never expected a session on that Saturday afternoon.
True.
We'd behind the curtain, Jeff and I had recorded our end of day podcast. We had done all of our work assuming there wouldn't be a ball bowled, only for them to say, they're on in 20 minutes. Like, what?
Yeah.
Sometimes when it's pissing it down with rain, we try and get some things
Ahead
in the
of
can.
the curve.
But yeah, that Travis Head 6-hitting display, getting Australia to a credible, tally in the second innings, which all follows England falling into that deep hole and being 142 for 7, needing Wood and Stokes to get them out of trouble, the 2 Durham boys, taking on Todd Murphy, and that, that is the turning point. You can look back to Bairstow and Carey, but the reality is Australia put in a pretty decent effort in the first innings at Leeds in the context of Wood bowling as quickly as he did, and then having them 7 for 142, with them misfiring badly with Root and Bairstow falling in quick succession on that second morning, to scrap back from there with Wokes, with Wood. It was thrilling stuff.
And then Harry Brook, the sort of coming of age story on the last day, gets them home. It's 2-1, and I remember being asked at that point, will Australia be shaken up by that? And I thought, oh no, they'll shake it off at whatever. You've lost one Test match. You only need to win one of the last 3. They'll be fine, and then they go into Manchester and just get absolutely ploughed into the ground. Yeah,
I thought it would. I thought it would turn the series there. I just sensed that England played such exciting cricket that week at Leeds that it had a pretty good chance of morphing into the Manchester Test. In a way, it feels odd that we had a 9-day gap between Leeds and Manchester. I know some of our colleagues got away. We were immersed in what we were doing still.
It was the end of the women's series with the 1 day.
End of the women's series. I was doing a domestic game here at the Oval, actually, a 4-day game, county game, and it was like, the air went out of the balloon for a couple of days, and I felt like it served Australia's interests for the momentum to keep rolling on. Instead, having time to think about it, to sack David Warner 25 times between Leeds and Manchester, every column you read, the Green, Marsh, back and forth. Even what we were saying about maybe Glenn Maxwell comes in. Who knows? That might have worked well. I don't want to revisit history there. The Todd Murphy getting almost talked out of his spot in the team. I don't think Murphy gets dropped if it's a 3-day turnaround.
No.
I think over time we considered that number 8 position a floating spot, whereas before it was a bowler spot. And in the end, not having Murphy or a recognised spinner did hurt them at Manchester.
Well, it was a lack of decisiveness because they had Green coming back and Marsh having just made the 100, and they tried to, jam them both in there, and it just didn't work. The fit didn't work. It didn't feel right as a team. Although maybe Green there would have been crucial if they'd had to bat more time. Broad picks up his 600th wicket. Australia batting first don't sort of finish off what they need to do with that innings. I mean, if Australia bat another 2 sessions, it ends up being a draw, but they are in control of that draw, and they don't get sort of ritually humiliated in front of everybody by having to bowl for the next 2 days.
Yeah, the top edge from Travis Head just after tea, wasn't it, to get Broad his 600th wicket, and that summed up the whole day where they were getting these important starts of partnerships, but couldn't go on and make them anything meaningful. And that they're bowling. I'm pretty sure they're bowling by the final bit of day one, Australia. I don't think they made it to day two, or they might have they did actually.
They just made it. Cummins gets that
out first ball. And that's an Anderson wicket at his home ground, his final wicket at his home ground, and all the rest of it. But,
and Broad getting Khawaja as 599, so, and David Warner's being out there going, oh God, don't, please, don't let it happen. It didn't happen.
Well, we didn't touch on that at Leeds, did we, either? That Broad getting Warner in the first over of the Test match and pretty much jumping into the Western Terrace like he was Pat Cash at Wimbledon in '87, and then doing it again in the second dig, and you know, ignoring the Warner piece because we know he doesn't get dropped, but Broad for a moment. Really making it a live question whether Warner would survive.
Yeah, the crazy partnership with Crawley and Root, the sort of just the ride your luck stuff with Crawley through the first 100 and then just dominating them after that. And then coming through to the Bairstow stuff, all of the arguments about whether they should have gone harder and declared earlier, and it probably wouldn't have made a difference, but who knows, the way you saw England go through Australia here at the Oval in a couple of hours.
Yeah, a low-key brilliant series, Joe Root. You know, the 118 not out on opening day. The 80-something he made in unison, or in partnership, in union with Crawley. He was so good that day. He controlled the tempo in that partnership.
The 46 at Edgbaston that allowed Ricky Ponting to do that. He made 40-odd, now he's out.
Yeah, well, it was pretty bloody good while it lasted. And the 90-odd he made here, which, you know, again... You
91 here,
look back at it, and he has one century, and he might feel like he's underperformed based on his regular rhythm of hitting a ton every other match of late. But yeah, nowhere near the player of the series, but a low-key fine performance.
Yep, and then all of the absurdity about rain and how it was the first time a Test match had ever been washed out, and we needed to completely revamp the sport because it wasn't fair. And it was frustrating that it wrecked the positioning of the series for us as people who cover it, but also, come on, Test matches get drawn.
We said it ourselves, you know, we were both, it's unusual for us to have a stake in who wins, but we were both invested in England winning at Manchester to build up this to be the finales of all finales. And we don't quite get it. I mean, they're a bit sort of good, like, you know, Cummins on day one giving themselves a chance to bowl on this surface, which was a good shout. First time they finally win the toss, Cummins calls tails, and it comes down in his favour after 4 heads. You know, they kind of go...
The fact that he said at every toss of the series, we would have bowled first, but it might not have worked out so well as you had.
You know, they go the complete opposite of Bazball after England go at like 5.5 and over on the first day or whatever it was, and they dig in and it doesn't work, but maybe it kind of works because their bowlers are tired, having bowled so many spells. And, you know, the opposite of that, where we have England have the, you know, perhaps the most classical Bazball day where they rack up, was it 390 odd in the second innings? They eliminate the deficit in 1 over, the most expensive first Ashes over ever, after on day one having 15 deliveries in a row, which they scored off, which was breaking all the records as well. And yeah, they get bowled out, and Murphy bowls well and all the rest of it. But as we talked about on the daily shows of late, it was the best expression, the most controlled expression of what they've been talking about for a couple of years.
And it's about doing enough, and 380 is enough. You know, you set a team 380 in the 4th innings, you will win most of those matches. It doesn't matter that it's been chased a couple of times. It hasn't been chased all the other times.
And then Broad walks down the stairs, and while we're recording our podcast, says, actually, that's me done.
Yep.
So just to add another layer of, you know, off-field to all this, that Broad's column's coming out, he talks to Sky, they have the montage ready, and when we come off, I'm bombarded with a bunch of texts saying...
It was a very organised impulsive. He's like, I just decided at 8:30 last night, and I just happened to have teed it up with the TV networks, the newspaper, tipped off some of the folk in the press box, but not others who were completely screwed over by it, because suddenly at 7:30 p.m, having written all their copy for the day, they have to suddenly deal with this retirement thing and go and scrap everything and write new pieces and all the rest of it.
Then he gets the Guard of Honour and whacks a 6, right? Like, you know, after all of that, you know, the eulogising of Broad's career, and we were part of that. We did an episode just before on Morning 4, which feels like a long time ago, boy. Hits that 6 last ball of his career, which the crowd get a chance to get very excited about. But then Australia have a great day, and it gives us the chance for something special here on the final day. It doesn't quite mature into that. Now we've got what's been called at home as ballgate after the change of ball.
Okay.
I said off the top, I don't want it to be too much of the post
series we talked about it on the Daily Show, so, you know, I think we've covered it.
No, just simply to say that, like, that is the last thing, the last piece of the last bit of protein for those who need this kind of controversy and this back and forth to thrive.
It'll be, you know, in 10 years' time when a few saddos are still hanging on to things that they're pissed about, and half of them will be saying, oh, Johnny Bairstow was, he tapped his foot, it was the end of the over. And the other half of the saddos will be like, oh, but what about the ball? They changed smash the ball. And that's it. That's fine. They can sit in a room together and yell at each other.
I think while everyone else will be talking about the Bales, certainly Broad, and anyone who will listen to Broad talk about that bit of magic, the changing the Bales before he gets Todd Murphy next delivery. And
If Australia sacked the chair of selectors, that'll also be changing the Bales.
And they are our moments of the series, not just our moments, but I thought it was worth just going through that. And before we wrap up and say goodbye, it is worth just casting forward to, this is a great rivalry in world sport, and it comes around every 18 months and every 2.5 years. Now we've got the longer gap, so it has time to sort of percolate and mature again, and we have a fairly good idea of who's not going to be there for Australia and England next time. But the distinct possibility that Stokes will. Question marks over so many Australian players like, Stark, Hazelwood, Smith, Mitchell Marsh, knowing that players like Matthew Renshaw are going to have their time to shine. Will they make it to the next Ashes as senior players for Australia? Will England have, James Rue or Saqib Mahmood or Gus Atkinson or Jamie Smith or all of them or none of them? Like I mentioned at the top, that Crawley and Duckett and Root and Brook and probably Bairstow. I'm missing someone in there. Ollie Pope. They'll all be there in a couple of years' time. So it feels like that where the volatility might more be.
Maybe,
touch and go. 50-50 for Bairstow. But I reckon all the others will be there in Australia.
Also because he's such an eyeball player, we have seen that can dip quickly as well. So it's a long 2.5 years to try to get through. But sure, we know Broad and Moeen won't be there. Anderson, well, God knows.
Never say never.
Never say never. Kawaji, absolutely 100% right off him being there. Who knows? He could stick around until 38. It's
a good point. Given the way he's playing as he is right now, he might feel like he's making up for a bit of lost time. I'm just assuming that at 38 he's done. But Chris Rogers only returned to the Test team when he was Kawaji's age now, and had 2 very productive years at the top of the list for Australia. Bowlers like Josh Tongue, who've shown something. Sad that Tongue only played 1 Test. Like, he was a really important contributor to that Lord's performance for England. I don't know win, but they're nowhere near it without Tongue taking those key wickets in the top 4, as he did throughout. Likewise, Todd Murphy, played twice, didn't really play at Leeds, kind of played at Leeds. Here, he laid a marker.
Battered at Leeds.
Here he laid a marker with bat and ball to show that when the time's right for Nathan Lyon, there would be a great successor. Lyon, he'll be there still, I expect, because he's now seen as a more valuable asset than ever before.
So I think we can say it's 2-all. It's a different feeling to the one in 2019, which was sort of anticlimactic in a lot of ways. It was Australia already had their peak when they had their attention, and then it trailed off at the end. And this one feels different. It feels more, there was more of an upsurge towards the end. It feels like a reasonable result. And I think I'm fairly happy to call it there. Yeah,
it's a team that 4 years ago still had a lot of players coming to and just at their peak. This team has been at its peak, and now there'll need to be regeneration. Didn't really talk about the quicks who might come through. Lance Morris, Sean Abbott, there'll be others, right? 4 years ago, the big 3 and Lyon were the big 3 and Lyon. That's not as conclusive anymore. Pat Cummins won't be leading this team forever. He's been pretty clear about that. He'll be a member of the ranks. But, where does Mitch Stark fit in? Where does Josh Hazelwood fit in? These are open questions now. And that's the great thing about Test cricket. It's an ongoing fluid process, selection and replacement of players, and why it makes these contests so great, because when generations go through together, like we've just seen pretty much end here at the Oval, it feels all the more nourishing because we've watched their journey from the start.
All right. This has been the final word. Ashes, farewell. The wrap, the overview, the retrospective, whatever you want to call it. It's been a hell of a series. Thanks for taking the ride with us. Thanks to Westfield for looking after us throughout.
Thanks to all of our patrons who, at the core, make all of this possible. If not for them, we wouldn't be able to do the things that we do. So patreon.com/the final word. If you want to join up there, be part of our history show, be part of our Discord, be part of our meetups, be part of our live shows, all of that other side of things that that means an awful lot to both Jeff and I. And to reiterate your words about Westfield, they've been a really cool partner. Loved working with them, and hoping we can do a lot more with them in the near future.
Right. So that's been the final word. A. Collins, G. Lemon. We'll see you later.
Bye.